The Sinister Grace chapter has been no stranger to being controversial, and I'm sure none of you need an in-depth analysis of why exactly that is. From the proposed changes to slugging and tunneling on the PTB to Crossu being extremely overtuned to a... Wait, I just said you guys didn't need an in-depth analysis. I'm not sure why I'm explaining it. You guys are smart, I'm sure you understand. Regardless of my back and forth attitude when it comes to talking about current ongoing issues concerning the game and its community, I do keep a keen eye on what conversations are actually going on, despite how it may come across sometimes. I mean, what kind of Dead by Daylight player would I be if I wasn't keeping up with the game to know exactly what horseradish I'm about to lose every match to? I care about this stuff. I've got to know what's going to ruin my mood and win. I sort of have to plan my day around it. I'm sure some of you guys can relate. Loading into Dead by Daylight matches straight up feels like gambling sometimes, which I'm sure is one of the many reasons I just can't stop playing it. On a completely unrelated note, did you know 99% of Dead by Daylight players quit before they have that perfect match they've been craving? What a shame. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. There's been a big debate going on regarding Behavior's recent changes to the palette density of a lot of maps, and I can't help but butt my ugly head into it. I mean, some players are saying it's straight up ruining the game for them, and another group is claiming that this is all engineered outrage, and the issue that people are losing their minds over isn't even an issue at all. Believe it or not, I have actually seen players saying that. Unfortunately for them, that just won't do. Not for me. Like I said, I like to know exactly what I'm going up against from match to match, and I'm not going to let an actual issue get brushed off as if it's not even there. What do I look like, a politician? No, if there's an issue, I want to find out, and if it's an actual problem, I want to know. But not only that, I want you guys to know. I'm going to crack this case open like an egg and figure out exactly how much of an issue this really is. Like I'm a detective or a journalist or something. Join me today while we discuss whether or not palette density is breaking Dead by Daylight. Some of you who are avid watchers of the channel might know that this isn't the first time I've taken a crack at this issue. For those of you who watch my video on the map Disturbed Ward, you might know that a large chunk of that video was dedicated to talking about how the palette density update had affected that map. And of course, it wasn't exactly positive. Like I said, one step forward, one step back. While they made the actual map smaller, a welcome change considering how much of a miserable experience it was, they unfortunately offset that good change with one I can only describe as being complete and total dookie, being the addition of pallets which could sometimes spawn nuts to butts and leave no dead zones between them. I stopped myself from getting too technical and analytical when talking about that issue because, well, I figured a video like this was on its way, and lo and behold, here we are. I can be so predictable sometimes. However, as you're probably well aware, the Crotus-Pren realm wasn't the only one affected by this update, as many realms were given this same treatment. Specifically, the Macmillan, Autohaven, Coldwind, Haddonfield, Backwater Swamp, Red Forest, Yamaoka State, Ormond, and Borgo realms. Obviously, in addition to Crotus-Pren. I think it's fairly obvious that many maps were affected by this. 28 to be exact. Out of the 44 total maps in the game, the palette density changes affected over half of them, which means these changes are nothing to sneeze at. This isn't something only a small group of players will notice, not even just the group of people who really analyze maps to understand why they suck ass. So people like me, I guess. No, if you play Dead by Daylight, you will run into these changes, which means I really want to let you know exactly how much this is truly affecting your games. A change like this cannot go without a deeper look, and fortunately, due to how often I'm seeing people complain about it, I don't need to worry about that too much. However, how much is it truly affecting games? Are people just noticing strong setups more because they're looking for them? Setups that would have been there before this change even happened? Well, those are all good questions, but there's an even bigger one that I want to address first. When looking at the palette density update, it's very understandable to have a simple question on your mind. Why? By that I mean, why would Behavior just decide to throw a billion pallets onto maps and call it a day? Well, based on their own words, they increased pallet density in order to reduce the amount of dead zones that could potentially spawn on maps. Dead zones being areas on maps with nothing for survivors to use, making them places where the killer just wins chases without really trying. Listen, no one likes dead zones, right? I mean, literally no gameplay happens there. Why would you? Well, unless you like winning chases by default when playing killer, I guess. More power to you in that case. Well, While trying to remove dead zones might sound like a solid choice on paper, it unfortunately has the nasty side effect of making every area on the map feel somewhat safe for the survivors most of the time. There's a bit more to that, which I'll talk about later. While some maps needed to be a bit stronger for survivors, such as Haddonfield or Coldwind, not all of them needed the treatment that they got. I mean, Macmillan is generally a pretty great realm, and as far as I know, people weren't really complaining about how unsafe they were. Classic behavior, changing something nobody asked them to, and leaving the actual issues to rot. Gotta love them. Like I said in my last video, Dead by Daylight is a resource management game, and a large chunk of skill expression is knowing when to keep pallets up and when to throw them down. Pre-drop every pallet and you'll end up with nothing left by the midpoint of the match. Refuse to drop any pallets and you might go down really quick. There's a middle ground that you have to find, and knowing how to use what you have is a large chunk of DBD's core gameplay. That and knowing how to connect tiles together. While dead zones are extremely boring and not engaging in the slightest, there's a level of nuance you have to tackle the issue with. A nuance that I don't think Behavior kept in mind at all when making these changes. The idea here is also surrounding how fast strong killers tend to deal with pallets, and trying to even the playing field by giving survivors more to work with. Some of you might be thinking right off rip that this idea stinks because only strong killers can put up with an abundance of pallets, while weaker killers are going to have a miserable time dealing with them and spending all game forcing down pallet after pallet in hopes that there is nothing left by the time that most generators are done. And you're absolutely right, that's exactly the issue. Killers like Kaneki, Dracula, Nurse, obviously, and a few others are so strong that more pallets might level the playing field for players that aren't good enough, or at least not knowledgeable enough about each killer to properly handle their power at loops. But all it does is increase the strength disparity of killers, which is a topic I've talked about plenty for one lifetime, and I'm sure I'll talk about it again at some point. Killers that are forced into situations where they have to chase normally, like Plague, Trapper, Ghostface, sometimes Pig, and Legion, to name a few, are really going to struggle with the addition of filler pallets to a lot of areas that didn't exactly have them before. Combine this with problems like map size and potentially strong items that survivors are bringing, and weaker killers are going to spend all game feeling like they're being bullied and can't do much to stop it, which is something we should definitely be trying to stop from happening. We're not really doing anything to beat the Dead by Daylight is a bully simulator allegations, huh? It's great that maze tiles were given some more variety to appear in, and the fact that they weren't affected by these changes is without a doubt a good thing. That hasn't changed at all. But with the abundance of filler pallets that can now spawn around them, gameplay on a lot of maps is just generally going to feel worse. That's not to say dead zones can't spawn, but it's a lot less likely after the pallet density update. Even with that though, I've seen situations where there are dead zones on a map, but there are also incredibly safe areas that spawn a dozen pallets within arm's length of each other, all connected through a variety of ways. So this update didn't even really fix what it set out to. It just leaves us with the same problem we had before, where some areas on the map have absolutely nothing around, while some others might be blatantly unfair for the killer. So why do this? I don't know, man. This update feels like a continuation of a problem I've had with recent Dead by Daylight changes, which feel like they're really dumbing down gameplay on both sides. On one end, I understand that Dead by Daylight is a hard game to get into. There's a lot to learn, and relying on content creators to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to explaining how to play the game is not exactly what we should be doing. I mean, realistically, I'd have had a much harder time understanding DBD when I first got into it without content creators like Otz, Scott Jun, Tofu, and Bricky being really good at explaining certain aspects of the game. By the way, shout out to anyone who watched Bricky's Killer Case Files. They were great, I wish he still made them. Anyway, the point I'm making is that by adding so many pallets to specific areas, it makes smart decisions so much less impactful. It's almost like a survival horror game which gives you a ton of ammo. It somehow makes the whole experience much less engaging, as your choices no longer feel as important. While it might not matter nearly as much when going against players who drop every pallet, it gives smart survivors so much more to work with, as they'll have a much easier time connecting tiles and giving the killer a run for their money, as well as dumbing down that core gameplay, obviously. This is why I think dead zones are a necessary evil. While they're not particularly fun, they force the killer and the survivor to think so much harder about where to take chases and what generators to protect. I don't like the idea of that macro gameplay going away in service of giving survivors an easier time when going against strong killers. Like I said, that's only accounting for how the best best killers are going to fare and completely ignoring the weaker killers who are going to be eating pallets for breakfast. Again, I have to reiterate that I understand that dead zones aren't exactly fun when it boils down to regular gameplay, but at the same time, they're a necessary evil when it comes to a resource management game like Dead by Daylight. If you give one side a lot more to use, all of a sudden they're punished so much less for making mistakes and no longer have to think about where to take chases and how to loop effectively. It's dumbing down the core gameplay. Like I said, this change would only make sense if you're assuming that a majority of the killers on the roster can somehow deal with pallets and get them down quick, which would be true if every killer was like around A tier, but we have to remember that a large chunk of the killer roster is, well, kind of dog shit. Some killers show their age more than others in terms of how they're designed, and if Behavior wants to take the route of making every killer extremely good, then I guess that'd be fine, but that's not the world we live in right now. Even a recent killer who has been reworked, like Myers, still isn't that great. Don't worry, I have a video planned about him in the future in case you're curious about my thoughts. Additionally, we also run into the issue where macro killers get the short end of the stick again, as if they didn't already have a hard enough time being ridiculed by the community and having their existence constantly put on blast because they're harder to counter typically. If Behavior really wanted to counter what they consider to be stronger killers by adding more pallets, then they'd have to make specific changes for going against those killers, which I'm not sure they're going to do. When going against a killer like Crossu, Blight, Nurse, Kaneki, Dracula, and a few others, maybe adding more pallets would be okay, but just throwing on additional pallets to maps and completely ignoring the fact that weaker killers are going to have a miserable time seems like a massive oversight. For Behavior, who definitely want DBD matches to feel different game to game, to keep making choices that push players towards only choosing the strongest killers, well, they're gonna keep making a large group of players mad by reinforcing choosing only the best killers and no one else, which is obviously going to make matches feel the exact same. I don't know, this change in particular feels so honestly kind of offensive. As someone who typically enjoys playing the weaker killers on the roster, I now feel like I'm being actively punished for not choosing the top 5 strongest killers to play every single game. I thought we wanted DBD to be a bit more casual, fun, and a fresh experience every match. Why are we making changes that actively push the game towards feeling extremely formulaic and boring? Is it just me that feels that way? Hopefully Behavior sees the outrage regarding the changes to a large group of the maps and walks it back in one way or the other. Again, if they keep those changes for the killers they consider to be stronger, it won't be that big of a deal. But I don't know what they're gonna do, so I'll be waiting patiently for that to happen. Until then, that's it for me, gamers. Hope you enjoyed and have a great day.